How's it going? Andrew here with another painting video, and in this video I've got another on plein air adventure to share with you, as well as my top 4 tips for painting outside. So this morning we're heading to Tunnel Beach, which is a little beach not too far from where I live, and I thought I'd go and show Freeman what this place was all about. There's some pretty epic cliffs and sea stacks, so he's keen to get some more seascape material.
I've actually been in the works for what, almost a year?
Yeah, it's been like a year, and it's been like a year since the last time you and I were there. Yeah. So we couldn't have asked for better light.
Looks beautiful.
This is gonna be a lot of fun. What an epic coastal location. The boys and I deliberated for a little while and ultimately decided to split up. I was going to paint from a vantage point down here, and they were going to stay on top of the hill and see what they could produce. So I'm set up here on top of this cliff. It's an amazing view. I'm loving these diagonal lines that the waves are forming, leading your eye into the composition. And I'm thinking I'm gonna go for that vertical format rather than this landscape, because I wanna get that depth in the scene. So the first thing I'm gonna do is just lay out some color here, and I'm going for a pretty simple, limited palette here. Now first up, a bit of burnt umber. This is gonna really help me with the depth in my shadows, creating some darker tones. It's nice and warm. Really handy color. Virtually every palette that I use has got burnt umber in it. I always put that right next to the titanium white, but before I do, I've got some transparent yellow oxide, which I can see a little bit coming through in the shadows of some of these sea stacks and cliffs. The titanium white's going to be really opaque. It's going to help me get really good coverage really quickly. And then I think we're going to go with cadmium yellow, some quinacridone magenta, cobalt teal, ultramarine blue. Keen to get started. Now my first step is to draw the composition in. I mix up a little bit of color, which is a mixture of burnt umber and quinacridone magenta, and using a synthetic brush, I draw in the outline of my composition first. Now I can move any one of these lines if I'm not happy with the location. I try to make decisions quickly based on what I see directly in front of me. I want to make sure that I have ample room for all of the important aspects of the composition. So this is why drawing helps so much, just sketching it up in a loose fashion to make sure that we're on the right track. Now I always like to start with the sky first in terms of color, because it's the sky that sets the tone and the color dynamic throughout the painting. I mix up a little bit of titanium white and ultramarine blue, but also making sure that I've got some burnt umber and quinacridone magenta there to add to the mix to create some interesting grays and violets. In the whites of the clouds, I'm using plenty of titanium white, but I'm making sure that I tone this down with burnt umber and ultramarine blue to create more of a light gray. I want to save my tonal best for last year because we're going to have a really strong lighting dynamic towards the end of the painting. I bring my tiers of depth forward towards the viewer, so the next thing in line is that distant ocean, and I've dropped the tone here, allowing for more ultramarine blue and burnt umber to come through. And as I bring the ocean colors towards the foreground, I'm getting more saturated. This, together with controlling my tones, will help create some three-dimensionality within this scene. Now I need something to improve the consistency of the paint and that flow off the brush so that I can cover this canvas quickly. So I'm going to use Liquid Original as my medium. That Liquid Original medium is going to help this painting dry very fast. It's even going to start to go sticky on me within an hour of me working out here. That's going to make it a little bit easier to layer in case I have to go back and add any details back over the top. Now the light out here is changing pretty quick. There's not a minute to waste. So I follow along with the general rule of thumb, working with my furthest distance away, and then start bringing these tiers of depth towards the viewer. So next in line here are these cliffs and sea stacks. and I begin to mix up some darker tone now, which has more burnt umber and ultramarine blue coming through. And I'm starting to kick these colors just a little bit with that transparent yellow oxide. Now a cloud has passed overhead, reducing this scene to a simple combination of colors. And it's a good thing that I've got some simple colors on my palette, and I've limited that palette and my options for mixing. This is what allows me to create some cleaner color. These items that are closest to the foreground are going to be considerably darker. So again, I have more burnt umber and ultramarine blue coming through here. And also, my greens are going to become more saturated, so there's going to be more cobalt teal and cadmium yellow used for these foreground elements. By combining this carefully considered color and this dynamic brushwork, hopefully we can create something resembling the scene in front of us. Another thing that helps me achieve clean color is working in zones. So I bring edges of zones together. You noticed I did this with the sky and the cliffs and that distant ocean, but I've left these gaps here, which were the zones for those breaking waves. And I'm now beginning to apply some of this white color. Again, not quite pure white, it's a little ways from the top of my tonal range. We're going to save those bits of pure white for the very end. I use just the end of a bristle filbert brush to create some interesting shapes for that whitewater. I'm just finishing up now and I've totally lost my light. This cloud literally has come out of nowhere and has blocked out all of the sun, but I decided when I first started this painting that I was just going to cling on to that lighting dynamic that I had right at the start and just carry on through and see if I could just get something that closely resembled what this scene looked like when I first got here. But this is the nature of on plein air painting. You never know what you're going to get and you never know when it's going to change on you, so you just have to do the best you can. This painting is coming close to the finish line, and now I'm starting to pay more attention to that whitewater and my finer details. Again, I'm adding just a touch more white as I progress with this, now approaching the purest white I can muster. I want the brightest spot to be against one of the darkest spots to really create some dynamic contrast. I had some final little highlights along the tops of the cliffs and those sea stacks, and start bringing out just a touch more yellow in the highlights of the grasses on top of those cliffs. With just the end of the brush, I fill in those little spots where the undercolor is showing through. I do want a little bit of warmth left in the scene, however, because it adds so much richness to the painting. Now there's my completed study of Tunnel Beach, and you know it's an authentic on plein air painting because it's complete with a fly. It has been an absolute blast painting here on top of this cliff. It's now time to catch up with the boys and see how they got on with their paintings.
Well, we got here, beautiful location, and this guy, instead of painting the most incredible geological formation, decides to come down here and paint something over there.
I know, well, I wanted to paint this, but you guys...
We're up there taking
we're
the whole view,
up
so.
there.
And it's
in fact, Sam's still up there.
He's still there.
Isn't he?
Yep.
Somewhere way up on that hillside.
So we're going to go up there. We're going to go up there and have a look at what actually happened.
Yeah. Well, it's a huge climb getting up here, and it's just... The sun's out at the moment, obviously, but the whole time while we were painting, it just got overcast, didn't it, guys?
Yeah.
And we just totally lost our light. But hey, you pulled it out in the end. It's pretty good, Sam.
Thanks, mate.
So this is the gear I have to carry up the hill. Got my on plein air kit right here with all my pochade box and cleanup gear. Tripod for painting, tripod for filming, the drone, 2 cameras, and maybe a little bit of food if I get hungry. And I have to take all this stuff up this hill. And I was painting all the way over there, pretty far away.
And you've pretty much got no one else to blame but yourself. Hey, because we're up here painting for this incredible view, and you're down there faffing about with your drone, mate.
Oh, come on, he's just jealous. I mean, look at this. How cool is this? I get to add these epic drone sequences to my videos, which goes to show just how epic this place is. Yeah, I know, sometimes I can get a bit carried away with the drone, but I'll be able to add it to more videos in the future, so long as I don't crash it.
Oh, what?
Alright, back to painting. Perched high above, Freeman's created a little gem. He's a passionate painter. I really admire his approach.
Yep, it's hot work, I tell you. Anyone who thinks that plein air painting is a glamorous job, I got another thing coming. See that? Beads of sweat? That's dedication. We're doing it tough. We're doing it tough.
And Samuel Earp was quite proud of his effort.
All right. Oh, dude! Stop it! You just smashed that out.
Come on, bro, you got to be proud of that.
Yeah. I thought it was going to turn into complete disaster, especially when it clouded over.
Yeah.
I was really didn't think it was going to work at all, but.
Now let me take a quick minute to tell you about this video's sponsor. SKILLSHARE is an online learning community with more than 25,000 different classes from design to digital media to business and much, much more. Premium membership gives you unlimited access so you can join classes and communities that are just right for you. Now, whether you want to fuel your curiosity, creativity, or even your career, SKILLSHARE is the perfect place to keep you learning and thriving. Now, personally, I used SKILLSHARE in the past to sharpen my Photoshop skills, and currently I'm using it to learn a little bit more about photography and digital media. SKILLSHARE is also super affordable, with an annual membership costing less than $10 a month. Join more than 7 million creators learning with SKILLSHARE. The first 500 of my subscribers to click that link in the description down below will get a 2-month free trial. Now guys, honestly, I'll only work with sponsors who I actually use and I can get behind the brand because I believe in the product. And I've used SKILLSHARE and I'm going to continue to do so. Now, let's get back to painting. We have arrived at Nugget Point on the South Island of New Zealand. And this place gets its name from these amazing rock formations that jut straight out into the ocean. Now, we've been wanting to paint this spot for ages, but I have a feeling we're not going to get the session we were after. It's just beautiful, peaceful, serene down here at the coast, and I like to get a nice, quiet spot to try and paint, because concentration is key. So I'm just going to set up here with all my mates. They're crazy. I gotta get a start.
Where are we?
Where are we, guys? Let's get a wiggle on.
So what are you thinking, Freeman?
It's nuggety, mate.
Yeah, it is.
It's nuggety. It's pretty epic. I'm loving it.
Sam's not happy.
I'm not feeling it, dude.
You're not happy. Oh,
You're just gonna have to man up.
what? Too many people?
It's pretty
Too many tourists?
We decided to brave the crowds and the wind and see if we could knock out a little study. Now, I don't think I can handle so many nuggets in one painting, so I decided to focus in on just a few and make a little study of these. So for tip number 2, make a decision. Decide what you can leave out. Again, I begin to sketch in these sea stacks using a synthetic brush, and for the initial stages, I'm only worried about the outline. I begin to add just a little bit of a darker shadow towards that lead edge of the stacks. And then I begin to bring the ocean in around to meet these rocky forms, working again edge to edge and zone to zone. Now we can get some idea of the reflections that are happening out here in the ocean, but for this I just want a simple little study, something done really quick as a memento of this experience. And again, working on plein air like this is such a good way to hone our skills in observation and really learn about what light and nature does. All of this information I can take back into the studio and it will inform bigger studio paintings. There is no replacement for this practice. Nature is simply the best teacher. Now this has been a fantastic painting location, and I think we might come back again and study these rocks further, but perhaps when it's not so busy out. I'm really glad Sam decided to stick around because he ended up with the best painting of the day. Check out this beauty. Well, we're here in the morning in Glenorchy, stopped off at a little beach, and we're just looking around for the right location at the moment. And a few things are kind of standing out. You know, there's some trees up here under the mountain. That could work as a location. It's a little bit difficult making a decision, so Freeman's down there. What do you think, Freeman? What do you reckon? You happy? He's pretty happy. How about you, Sam?
I'm actually quite keen to just have a little quick drive around to see if we can see anything else.
Yeah, okay. Once we're set up, we're locked in and committed. Yeah. It means we have to do it.
Smash up painting.
Exactly.
Well, if we just go for a little drive and we'll just see if anything grabs us, and if not, we can come back here because this is on the way back anyway. So yeah, I mean, this spot's epic. I kind of just love the folds up there and that mountain there, and that big Tischler pine.
It's funny, every pine now is known as a Tischler pine since on this trip, because apparently I put pines in too many paintings. But I don't know, I kind of like it. That one there.
It's already there, so you can't paint that scene because it's already there.
It's already there?
You're like, oh, I think I'll just put a Tischler pine in
so
here.
I'm allowed to paint it if I imagine the pine and put it in after.
That's it.
Yeah, okay, right.
Pine Tischleri.
We stuck around here for a little while trying to decide on the exact location we wanted to paint. But I'm glad ultimately we decided to hit the road and try this spot in front of Mount Earnslaw. This was going to be a fantastic location, even though it was a bit exposed. All right, I think we've found it now. This is going to be the spot we're going to paint. I'm just loving what's going on here with these mountains. So, yeah, altogether, a little bit of wind, not bad. The biggest concern with painting back there was just...
That I liked it.
Yeah, Freeman liked it, and now my concern is I didn't bring enough paper towels to soak up all of Freeman's tears.
Oh.
So, yeah, we'll see
I
how we
actually
go.
have to say that it's amazing the diversity that you discover here as well, and I'm super stoked with this spot.
Yeah.
I'm not going to let you guys know that because they're going to play it out a bit longer, but
That's pretty cool, though. You happy, Sam?
yeah, man.
Now, despite this location being so exposed, the light was fantastic, and it was remaining relatively constant with these beautiful streams of light cascading down the mountains. There's not a moment to waste, so I begin sketching up the composition again with burnt umber on a synthetic brush. I clean up my drawing by using just a bit of medium on the end of the brush, and then work in exactly the same way, with my furthest elements first, working my way towards the viewer. Now, as you'll recall, I'm getting progressively more saturated and darker as I bring these tiers of depth forward. And there's a lot more yellow coming through in my mixes as well. Let's have a look and see how Freeman's getting on with his painting. Freeman works in a very similar way, establishing the painting in zones. He achieves a lot of dark tone right off the bat, which gives this painting a really striking resemblance straight away. I really do admire his dedication. It's kind of fun working alongside other artists because you do pick up a few little techniques here and there. Because working time is limited, here I have to move a lot faster than I would if I was just painting in the studio. So the size of my brush relative to the canvas is actually quite big, and this allows me to cover a lot of ground quickly. Which leads me to my third tip. Move fast. Use a bigger brush. Even though the brush may look small here, the panel is less than 8 by 10 in size. So the brush relative to the size of that panel is actually quite large, and this allows me to make bold, expressive brush marks and cover that ground quickly. I build up with these big chunky marks first and then start refining the marks towards the end of the process. In just under an hour, I have what you see here, and I continue to bring that depth forward towards the foreground. Now, Mr. Samuel Earp has got a very similar way of working as well, but he's got a very rich red background that he layers those cool landscape colors over the top, giving it a really nice vibrancy. It's great hanging around other landscape painters, especially when we get to soak up all of this inspiration. Now, green is one of the most dangerous colors when it comes to painting a landscape because it's very difficult to control. And this goes for whether we use it out of the tube or we mix our own green. I try to reserve the most saturated greens for the immediate foreground. So here, with all of these deciduous trees lying in the gully, as well as this grass in the paddock, these are going to be my brighter green notes. And notice the difference here between the quality of these greens and those in the background. They're a little bit more muted way off in the distance, and this contrast between the two is what will create an illusion of depth. Or at least that's the plan. Similarly, that depth is achieved by adding these darker tones to the foreground. And here, this pine, not a Tischler pine, a pine that actually exists, is going right here on this paddock. And it's going to be contrasted pretty strong against this bright green. Now, I have a lot of different shapes to the brushes that I use in my on plein air painting kit, and here I'm using an ivory dagger. This synthetic brush holds its bristles together really tightly and is great for those controlled marks of this fallen snow way up high in the mountain. I'm glad we stuck around here in this location despite the wind, because this is a really good idea for a bigger painting, I feel. I think with the final version, I might like to see some animals occupying this space in the foreground, grazing in this paddock. Again, I started with my drawing, and then working with those tiers of depth, I began to bring the composition forward towards the viewer, reserving my brightest colors and my darkest tones for the immediate foreground. We had time for one last painting session, and this time we're set up under the Remarkables, a spectacular set of mountains in Queenstown, New Zealand. This scene was rich with golden colors and some beautiful subtle hues in those distant mountains. Now, the panel that I'm working on here is 6 by 10 inches, so a little bit more of an elongated format. And I have a lot of information that I want to cram into this little scene. So again, I've decided what I can leave out, and I've tried to limit the palette somewhat. But I do want to move quite quickly because that light is shifting incredibly fast. The bigger brush is helping me here, this time mixing up some warm grays with plenty of burnt umber, ultramarine blue, and quinacridone magenta. There's only a hint of yellow coming through here, given by that transparent yellow oxide. What I'm going for here is a nice loose base to be able to layer some fine details over the top. I lock in some of my darker tones here because the light angle is changing fast, and these dark shadows right in the immediate foreground will help me anchor what's happening right here in this zone. With the synthetic brush, I add just a few of these chattered marks, using violet to give that indication of shadows up in the mountains. I started very loose here, and I'm beginning to refine and get a bit of detail in there. I love the way those violet shadows interact with those warmer colors that are glowing off the mountainside. I warm this up even more as I bring the depth forward. Again, adding more transparent yellow oxide, and now getting into a little bit of cadmium yellow. Here I decided to add the green towards the end, and again reserving these deeper green notes for the immediate foreground. Trying to play with that depth is very difficult. It's just about balancing our tones and colors correctly. Sometimes it works, sometimes we're a little bit off, but I just keep adjusting the paint until I achieve the desired effect. I just love the mixture of these trees, the way these poplars interact with the more round shapes of the deciduous trees in front of them. It really forms a nice pattern through the midground of the composition. Now on this painting I tried to keep my color simple. I also left out some of the details that I didn't think were necessary in the composition. I've used a bigger brush relative to the size of the canvas, and now for tip number 4, I'm beginning to refine this painting at the very end, saving those precious details to last. Now these finer details can be made with a wide range of brushes. All I'm using for most of them is just the end of a filbert bristle brush. And by loading it properly with enough paint on the end, I can get a relatively fine line. And here I'll reserve these marks for the thistles that are growing in the foreground, providing a little bit of sharpness here in this area. Now I think all in all, it's been a really successful day. Let's hear from the guys.
Yep, there you go. Yeah, I love painting these little studies, just a quick study, what probably took about maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours. I love coming to paint here anyway. It's just down the road from where I live, and this is always sort of my go-to area to come and paint. You can come here any time of the year, different weathers. No, it's been a really enjoyable day.
Me and Tish got up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and it's after 7:30 now in the evening. It's past my bedtime. And you kind of push yourself really hard, and there were moments there today, it was really windy, it was getting sunburn, I was kind of losing it a bit. We came out here and I just tried to do something a little bit more simply than before, and it's worked out. It's been my favorite little piece of the last 3 days. So yeah, sometimes just keeping it simple on plein air is the way to go.
Now a big thank you to my friends Samuel Earp and Freeman White. I've put a link to their work in the description down below. Make sure you check them out and follow them on Instagram. Now let's review those top tips again. For tip number 1, keep color simple. For tip number 2, make a quick decision. You've got to decide right away what you can afford to leave out. Tip number 3, related to tip number 2, use a bigger brush. You gotta move fast, so you have to cover that ground quickly. And for tip number 4, you gotta save those fine details for the very end. Often, there's a tendency for us to rush into detail right away. If we hold back, then those last little marks make all the difference. Now, a big thank you to SKILLSHARE for sponsoring this video, and remember, the first 500 to click that link in the description below get a 2-month free trial. Now, if you liked this video, then hit that like button for me and leave me a comment down below. If you want to come back for more and see more painting videos, then make sure you're subscribed to this channel. As always, you can find me on Instagram and Facebook, but most important, make sure you're subscribed through my website at andrewtischler.com. Thank you so much for stopping by. I'll see you again soon.